Story 1. The Abandoned Dormitory. The old dormitory stood at the edge of the city, shrouded in mystery and overgrown with vines. Once a bustling residence for students, it had been abandoned for decades after a tragic fire claimed the lives of its inhabitants. Local legends whispered that the dormitory was cursed, haunted by the restless spirits of those who perished in the flames. One rainy autumn evening, a group of 4 university students, Emily, Jake, Sarah, and Chris, decided to explore the abandoned dormitory. They had heard countless ghost stories about the place and were eager to prove they were nothing but exaggerated tales. Armed with flashlights, cameras, and a sense of youthful bravado, they made their way through the forested path leading to the crumbling building. As they approached the dormitory, a cold wind swept through the air, carrying the faint smell of smoke. The building loomed over them, its windows shattered and walls streaked with soot. The front door creaked ominously as they pushed it open, revealing a dark, cavernous interior. Dust particles danced in the beam of their flashlights, and the air was thick with an eerie silence. "This place gives me the creeps," Sarah muttered, clutching Jake's arm. "It's just an old building," Jake said, though his voice betrayed a hint of unease. "Let's take a quick look around and get out of here." The group ventured deeper into the dormitory, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The walls were covered in peeling paint, and graffiti scrawled by previous intruders added to the unsettling atmosphere. They reached the main staircase, which was charred and partially collapsed. Emily spotted a faded plaque on the wall that read, "In memory of those lost in the fire of 1978. May their souls find peace." As she read the words aloud, a sudden gust of wind blew through the hallway, extinguishing their flashlights. In the pitch darkness, they heard a faint, childlike giggle echoing from the floor above. The sound sent a chill down their spines. "Did you hear that?" Chris whispered, his voice shaking. "Probably just the wind," Jake said, trying to sound confident. "Let's keep moving." Reluctantly, they climbed the stairs, each step groaning under their weight. On the second floor, the temperature seemed to drop significantly, and the smell of smoke grew stronger. The walls here were blackened, and the remnants of charred furniture lay scattered across the floor. "Look at this," Emily said, pointing to a series of photographs pinned to a corkboard. The images depicted smiling students in their dorm rooms, seemingly oblivious to the tragedy that awaited them. One photograph caught her attention. A group of young women sitting on a bed, all smiling except for one. In the corner of the image, a pale figure with hollow eyes stared directly at the camera. Suddenly, the door at the end of the hallway slammed shut with a deafening bang. Startled, they turned to see a shadowy figure standing at the far end of the corridor. It moved closer, its footsteps slow and deliberate. "Run!" Jake shouted, grabbing Sarah's hand and bolting toward the stairs. The others followed, their hearts pounding as the sound of footsteps grew louder behind them. They reached the ground floor and sprinted toward the exit, but the front door was inexplicably locked. Panicking, they turned to find the shadowy figure descending the staircase, its form becoming more defined with each step. It was a woman, her face pale and twisted with anguish. Her eyes burned with an otherworldly light, and her mouth opened in a silent scream. "We have to find another way out," Chris yelled, leading them down a side hallway. They burst into what appeared to be the common room, where an old piano stood covered in dust. The keys pressed down on their own, playing a haunting melody that sent chills down their spines. "This way," Emily shouted, spotting a broken window. They climbed through it one by one, cutting themselves on the jagged glass but desperate to escape. Once outside, they ran as fast as they could, not daring to look back until they reached the safety of their dormitory on campus. The next morning, Emily checked the photographs on her camera, hoping to find evidence of their experience. To her horror, every image they had taken inside the abandoned dormitory was blank except for one. The group photo of themselves at the entrance. Standing behind them was the pale, hollow-eyed figure from the photograph in the hallway. The group never spoke of their experience again, but they all agreed on one thing. Some places are better left undisturbed. The abandoned dormitory remains a silent monument to the past, its secrets hidden in the shadows, waiting for the next curious intruder. Years later, rumors of the dormitory resurfaced when locals claimed to see faint lights flickering in its windows on stormy nights. Some said they heard faint cries for help carried on the wind, while others swore they saw figures moving behind the shattered glass. The legend of the cursed dormitory became a chilling reminder of the lives lost and the secrets that would never rest. One thing is certain, the dormitory story is far from over, and those brave or foolish enough to enter may find themselves part of its history, forever trapped in its haunting embrace. Story 2. The dormitory on a rainy night. The dormitory of the university was nestled deep in the outskirts, surrounded by dense forests where eerie tales had been passed down for generations. This university, with its centuries-old history, had red brick walls and long, shadowy hallways that always exuded a chilling atmosphere. Rumors spoke of a mysterious disappearance that occurred here over 2 decades ago, but no one dared to delve into the details. That night, rain poured relentlessly, thunderclaps shaking the sky with their roar. Rose, a final-year student, decided to stay in her room alone to finish an important paper. Her roommates had left for the weekend to visit their families. Though Rose didn't believe in the urban legends, she couldn't shake off the strange feeling that crept in whenever she was alone here. The dormitory was eerily quiet, with only a few dim lights flickering in the hallways. The sound of raindrops mingled with the howling wind, creating an unsettling symphony. Rose turned on her small desk lamp and focused on her laptop screen, trying to ignore the ominous atmosphere around her. Around midnight, as the rain outside seemed to intensify, Rose heard soft footsteps echoing in the hallway. She lifted her head, glancing at the slightly ajar door of her room. The footsteps stopped right outside her door, but there was no knock or sign of anyone entering. It must be the security guard doing his rounds, she reassured herself, though unease churned in her stomach. But then, the footsteps resumed, this time circling the hallway, growing closer with each loop. Rose felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She quickly got up, locked the door tightly, and returned to her desk. To drown out her fear, she played some soft music, but the rain and wind seemed to drown out every note. Just as she sat back down, something strange happened. The desk lamp began to flicker, and her laptop screen displayed an unexpected message. "You are not alone." Rose froze in terror, desperately trying to shut down the laptop, but the keyboard was unresponsive. The light in her room flickered erratically. Then, she heard it. A faint giggle, soft but unmistakable, coming from the corner of the room. Her heart pounded wildly as she realized she could feel an icy breath on the back of her neck. She turned around sharply, but there was nothing there, only the bare wall. Yet on the wall, eerie letters appeared as if being scratched by invisible claws. "Help me. Don't leave me." Rose screamed and bolted out of the room. The hallway was pitch black, the lights flickering sporadically. Footsteps thundered behind her, quick and relentless. She dashed down to the ground floor, only to find the main entrance locked tight. Loud banging echoed from the other side of the door, as if someone was desperately trying to get in. But Rose was too terrified to approach. In her panic, she suddenly felt hot, ragged breaths near her ear. A hoarse, haunting voice whispered, "I've been waiting for you for so long." Rose spun around. There, standing mere inches away, was a shadowy figure. A woman with long, disheveled hair covering her face. Her hollow eyes and pale, lifeless face sent chills down Rose's spine. The apparition extended a hand toward her and murmured, "Don't abandon me like they did." Rose stumbled backward, tripping over the steps and crashing onto the floor. When she looked up again, the ghostly figure had vanished. Yet, wet footprints stretched from the hallway directly to where she sat. Rose burst into tears, praying it was all just a nightmare. When she regained consciousness, Rose found herself in the dormitory's medical room. The security guard told her he had found her unconscious outside her room. Shaking, Rose recounted everything, but no one believed her. They chalked it up to exhaustion and stress from overwork. After that night, Rose moved out of the dormitory, never to return. Those who stayed behind claimed that, on rainy nights, they could still hear the faint sound of footsteps and eerie giggles echoing through the empty hallways. Some even swore they had seen the silhouette of a woman standing by the window, gazing out into the rain, as if searching for someone. The tale of the dormitory on a rainy night continues to be whispered among students. No one knows where the truth ends and the legend begins. But everyone agrees on one thing: never stay alone in the dormitory on a rainy night. Story 3. The Shadow Within the Dormitory. The old dormitory stood on the edge of the city, shrouded in mystery and overgrown with weeds. Once a bustling residence for students, it had been abandoned for decades after a tragic fire claimed the lives of many. Local legends whispered that the dormitory was cursed, haunted by a strange shadow that moved freely, unseen but ever present. One stormy autumn evening, for university students, Emily, Jake, Sarah, and Chris decided to explore the abandoned dormitory. They had heard countless ghost stories about the place and were eager to prove they were nothing but exaggerated tales. Armed with flashlights, cameras, and youthful bravado, they made their way down the forested path leading to the dilapidated building. As they approached the dormitory, a cold wind swept through, carrying the faint smell of burnt wood. The building loomed before them, its windows shattered and walls streaked with soot. The front door creaked ominously as they pushed it open, revealing a dark, cavernous interior. Dust motes floated in the weak beams of their flashlights, and the air was thick with an eerie silence. "This place gives me the creeps," Sarah muttered, clutching Jake's arm. "It's just an old building," Jake said, though his voice betrayed a hint of unease. "Let's take a quick look around and get out of here." The group ventured deeper into the dormitory, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The walls were covered in peeling paint, and graffiti left by past intruders only added to the unsettling atmosphere. They reached the main staircase, charred and partially collapsed. Emily noticed a faded plaque on the wall that read, "In memory of those lost in the fire of 1978. May their souls find peace." As she read the words aloud, a sudden gust of wind swept through the hallway, extinguishing their flashlights. In the pitch darkness, they heard a faint, eerie sound coming from the floor above. It wasn't footsteps, but something dragging along the ground, slow, deliberate, and menacing. "What was that?" Chris whispered, his voice shaking. "Probably just an animal," Jake said, though his grip tightened on the flashlight. "Let's keep moving." Reluctantly, they climbed the stairs, each step groaning under their weight. On the second floor, the temperature seemed to drop significantly, and the smell of smoke grew stronger. The walls here were blackened, and the remains of charred furniture were scattered across the floor. "Look at this," Emily said, pointing to a dark stain stretching along the hallway floor. It resembled a trail leading to a room at the far end. Against their better judgment, they followed it. The room's door was slightly ajar, and as they pushed it open, the hinges screeched like a warning. Inside, the room was empty except for a broken mirror leaning against the wall. The glass was cracked in several places, and in the dim light, they saw their reflections distorted. But there was something else, a shadow that didn't belong to any of them. It moved independently, gliding across the room before vanishing into the mirror. What the hell was that? Sarah gasped, backing away. "We need to leave," Chris said firmly. "Now." As they turned to exit, the door slammed shut behind them. The room plunged into darkness, and the sound of heavy breathing filled the air. A low, guttural voice whispered, "You shouldn't have come here." Panic set in as the shadow reappeared, crawling along the walls, growing larger and more menacing. It took the form of a figure with elongated limbs and hollow eyes that seemed to absorb all light. The group huddled together, their flashlights flickering as the shadow loomed closer. Emily fumbled with the camera, snapping photos in a desperate attempt to distract herself. Each flash of light seemed to momentarily disrupt the shadow, but it only grew more enraged. The air grew heavier, and an oppressive force pushed them to their knees. "Help us!" Sarah screamed, her voice echoing in the suffocating darkness. In a final burst of courage, Jake threw himself at the door, slamming it open with such force that they all tumbled into the hallway. They didn't stop to look back as they ran for the stairs, the shadow's growl echoing behind them. When they reached the ground floor, the front door was inexplicably open. Without hesitation, they bolted outside, the cold night air hitting them like a slap. The dormitory seemed to shudder behind them, and the sound of the door slamming shut echoed in their ears as they fled. The next morning, Emily checked the photographs on her camera, hoping to find evidence of their experience. To her horror, every image was blank except for one, a shot of the mirror. In the reflection, the shadow loomed behind them, its hollow eyes fixed on the group. The group never spoke of their experience again, but they all agreed on one thing: some places are better left undisturbed. The abandoned dormitory remains a silent monument to the past, its secrets hidden in the shadows, waiting for the next curious intruder. Years later, locals whispered of strange occurrences. On stormy nights, flickering lights were seen in the dormitory windows, and a shadow darted across the walls, silently watching, waiting. Those brave enough to venture close claimed they heard whispers in the wind, a warning to stay away. One thing is certain: the shadow within the dormitory is still there, hungering for new stories to tell.